So first thing I do in the morning is a workout for about 40, 45 minutes. And I think I'm saying that with a smile, but I think it's so important to start the day with having the mindset of I've done something which honestly is not the most fun. I don't really enjoy it. I'm not really motivated to put on my shorts and work out, but that builds up that mentality.
I guess the first question, Etienne, is your story is interesting because I saw your LinkedIn and it's like you were part of Kai's football team. You're like MVP soccer player and you're part of the UN and you became the president for Korea for a large marketing agency. What was the process like?
Yeah, it sounds pretty cool when you put it this way. It's a journey that was indeed super exciting, super fun, super challenging as well. So what happened is that back in 2009, I was just a young kid who had no clue what he wanted to do with his life. I was older than you back then, and yet I was nowhere near knowing what to do with my free time. The only thing I cared about was soccer
I don't know
by then.
either. I don't know either. I'm kind of confused, but
Well, even though you don't know, you're acting, you're doing stuff, and that's freaking awesome. Back then, the only thing I was doing was playing soccer, right? With my free time, really enjoyed it, but I was far from being good enough to ever pretend being a professional player. But anyway, back then, I moved away from my hometown, which is called Saint-Etienne, famous for its soccer team in France. I moved to Paris for my studies, and that's where I met Koreans for the first time. Never really heard of the country other than, capital city, Park Ji-sung, as well as Samsung and LG. And I thought it'd be actually a good idea to move to Korea, to go there to travel on my own. That was the first time for me to do that. And in doing so, I ended up being an exchange student in KAIST in Daejeon. And that's where I kept on doing the one thing I love doing, which was playing soccer. I would say, with no disrespect to Korea, that the average level of soccer is a lot higher in France than it is in Korea. And I guess that would explain why me having played in a even local team in France, I was a decent player in Korea, but decent player at the university level, right? Once again, I could never play for the K-League, for instance. And they had a big competition over there, a big competition, so 32 teams, and I ended up being the MVP of the All-Star Games of that competition. And just saying it is kind of funny, and it was, just awesome to get that kind of recognition. Now, I was nowhere near as good off the field because KAIST is an amazing university for really the brilliantest minds of this world. And
it's one of the best
that
in
was really,
Asia, right?
it's one of the best in Asia, and especially for engineering, which I'm not. I was on the management side of the faculty. So yeah, amazing place to be. And back then, I know I wanted to find a job, right? I wanted to find a job upon graduation. Before doing that, I had to find an internship, which I found in Korea. And that internship was for the United Nations. So I moved to Seoul. I did my internship for 6 months. And at the United Nations, they have that thing called project office. So it's usually a smaller team. We were about 15 people focused on one topic, and that topic was governance. And back then, in that context, it was electronic governance. So it's everything that public administrations do to help their citizens leverage digital technologies to have access to information, to execute boring stuff such as, paying your tax and so on. So essentially making the life of a citizen easier. And I was an intern, and I absolutely discovered data then, and I fell in love with data. And off the back of that internship, I really wanted to find a job in Korea, but it was near impossible for me. It's tough as a foreigner, as you may know, or as you may have heard, to find a job without speaking the language here. And that's why I ended up giving up and actually going for another challenge, which was to find a job in another country, not in France, but back in Europe. And I ended up landing a job in the Netherlands.
And then from there, that company got acquired by Jellyfish, and then you became a part of Jellyfish. Is that correct?
Almost. There is a step in between. So the company I joined back in Amsterdam was an American company called Optimizely. And it was a software, still is actually a software company. And they were about to launch their European headquarters in Amsterdam. And so I joined the team. There were about 4 or 5 people back then. And they just opened that office a few months before. And I started by being a sales development representative. So the guy who picks up the phone and picks up the inbound leads. That's what I was doing. I did that for 3 years. And then only did I move to France for another startup called Report, which got acquired by Jellyfish a few years down the road. And Jellyfish had offices in Korea. I asked for relocation to Korea And I ended up being here, sitting in front of you, and now I manage the Korean office of Jellyfish.
And then while like kind of seeing like your journey, it seems like one of the things you do is like like partnerships, helping like connect with clients, find clients, and connecting them. I guess like from your journey, what would you say are some like advices or key takeaways you learned on how companies or people should try to build partnerships with other companies?
It's a brilliant question. So partnerships has always been a part of my job, not my core focus. But I do remember that from working at Optimizely, there was a guy, his name was Ty, a British guy, brilliant guy. And he was the one who took partnerships to the next level and actually he has a podcast about partnerships, right? That is that kind
Really?
of guy. Maybe you should check it out as well. And yeah, partnerships is absolutely key. And it's true across, I guess, all industries, right? Because partnerships is a great way to piggyback on someone that may be bigger than you, right? So for instance, at Jellyfish, we partner a lot with Google. And that gives us access to amazing types of projects, amazing types of clients. And that's absolutely lovely. But the other way around is true, right? You want to partner with companies that may come across as more niche players, as somewhat, smaller players, but may have something you don't. And it's really what partnerships are all about. I think it's about creating a business for yourself, but also understanding and solving for the problems of your partner. At the end of the day, what you should be both trying to think about is how to solve the problems of your clients. And that's really what partnerships are all about at the end of the day.
Hmm. And what would you like when you're reaching out? I guess not like how do you go about building that relationship for the partnership? Is there things you kind of do from your experience, like, or actually, since you said this is not your main focus, what would you say is like kind of your main focus, like the main skill sets you've developed along your experience, and what would you say are lessons on that specific skill set? Because yeah.
Sure. Well, on partnerships, I'm still happy to answer, and actually that answer may apply to other areas. Very much like when you want to meet up with someone, whether it's for a job interview, an association, whatever that may be, right? Or us two speaking together. You want to do your homework, right? You want to do your research just like you have, right? You check out my LinkedIn profile. We've met before, but still you're doing that extra bit of homework. And B, you want to be genuinely curious about what those people's problems are, right? And so why would someone spend time with you essentially, right? And why would they spend time with you that one time? And why would they continue spending time with you? And I think that if you keep on doing your homework, your research, and if you're genuinely curious, connecting the two should, I think, end up with good ideas. And if those ideas are turned into or executed against, that's action. And if there's action, there should be motion. And then there's value that comes out of it.
So genuine curiosity is also very important.
It's so important. I think that I guess you probably know that, right? But as you're doing a podcast, the simple fact that you're having those conversations, you prepare those questions, so you genuinely care about finding something, right? About learning something. And that's where, creativity kicks in, right? And that's where, a work can be fun, I would say. So yeah, genuine curiosity is the most important. And that's something I apply a lot when I network, right? And that may also answer to the question you had, which is, what is one of the things you have developed? Well, one of the things I have developed, especially since I moved back to Korea a couple of years ago, is networking, right? Because when I moved to Korea, what I wanted to do is I wanted not to replicate an error I made when I moved to the Netherlands, which is that when I moved to the Netherlands, my social circle was mostly colleagues. And it's because my colleagues were awesome. I generally love spending time with them. And so I had no incentive to get out there and meet with people outside of work. And fast forward to today, it's kind of a shame because the only attachment to the Netherlands I have was people that no longer really live there because they were my colleagues, they were very international and so on. And so moving to Korea, I thought, okay, this time around, I need to build something of my own, which is not dependent only on my company, but something that I care about. It turns out that what I do, which is, data analysis related, it's related to my company, but there are many ways to be involved in that ecosystem. And La French Tech was exactly that. So I started with La French Tech, and then I thought, okay, French Tech is awesome, but I'd love also to do something of my own without saying I'm La French Tech or I'm Jellyfish. I'm Etienne, right? Look, I'm Etienne. My name is Etienne, and I'm interested in meeting with you because XYZ, right? And this is essentially how I do it. I use LinkedIn to do that in Korea, even though LinkedIn is not the most widespread, I would say, networking tool in Korea. But it's where the most, I guess, qualified people that I would need to meet are. Why qualified? Well, qualified for me is someone who would be speaking English, someone who is somewhat international, someone who works in the field of data, digital marketing, and that's kind of where Koreans that fit that profile are. They are on LinkedIn, right? And so that's where doing my homework. Once again, if I'm going to want to meet with someone, there must be a reason. I need to do some research, and I need to be genuinely interested and curious in finding more about that person. And doing that honestly has opened up so many conversations. And the only cost was buying coffee. I buy coffee. It's $5, maybe $3, right? And I get a good time with someone who is open to having a conversation with a guy they didn't know about a few days before.
It's absolutely amazing. I wish I had more money so I could buy coffees all the time for people, but like I do that as well, and it's actually like Korea seems so small, like in terms of Korea's not really spoken about, but it's like there's actually a tremendous amount of people like you know, cool people building cool things and all sorts of things. And I guess another question is, Jellyfish is a pretty big marketing agency. You guys work with, I saw one of your clients in your LinkedIn was Amore Pacific. And I remember I saw their office and it was so massive. Like, it's just, I don't understand why it's so big. But I guess, what would you say is the misconceptions people have of like large marketing agencies? Because I've seen a lot of small and big marketing agencies. I don't really know how they work. What would you say are misconceptions people have about it?
So I guess to answer this question, I'll start with me when I was outside of that. When I was outside of that, when I was at Optimizely, I was on the tech vendor side, right? I was selling technology and all I was selling was licensing fees. I did not even know I was not able to sell services, right? And there was that big thing, that big consumption, even I think today, when you're SaaS startup or company, you sell a software as a service, but you really sell software and you try really to not sell services because it's not as great for your valuation. And the more you sell the more you sell license, the more you're able to say, well, that's monthly recurring revenue or annual recurring revenue. And it's something that's highly predictable. Whereas when it comes to agencies, and I don't think it's a misconception, it's a proper fact, is lots of the revenue is service-based. Now, service could be a retainer. And a retainer means there is something that's recurring and that's still awesome because it's very predictable. Now, the reality is that still agencies, most of them, they would be charging on a project base. And when you do that, it means that there is a start date, an end date, and then it's ciao, bye, right? Unless you do an amazing job of saying, hey, we're done, but hey, how about we do something else, something new? And it's kind of yet another sales cycle. And so it's not as easy as just renewing or as just expanding the number of, user licenses you may have on your software. And so that's one thing which I see as a main difference between being on a tech provider side, especially as a SaaS provider, versus being on the agency side. The second thing I realized when I moved from a SaaS to agency is that when you do SaaS, your job is to say no, whereas when you work on the agency side, your job is to say yes. What that means is that when you buy the services of an agency, of a consulting firm, of someone who sells their brain power, you pay them to do something that has probably never been really done before, and you pay them to do it for you, just for you. It has to be custom made, right? And so you expect them to just freaking figure it out, right? And so it's never no. It's at worst, let me think about it and I'll get back to you. But it should always be, yes, I'm going to do it, especially here in Korea. Whereas when you're on the SaaS software, if you say yes to every client request, you're going to end up with what we call a Frankenstein technology, right? It's going to do so many things that it doesn't really do anything really well. And it will only betray the fact that you have no vision for your product, right? And so that's where I really had that conception of agencies being somewhat enslaved by their clients, right? Which is especially a conception we have here in Korea. And I would argue that it's not always the case. And I would argue that it's especially not as much the case when the agency is somewhat tech-enabled or invests in technology. And that's what essentially Jellyfish is, right? I joined Jellyfish because they acquired the tech startup I used to work for. They have done that after that time and again with a bunch of different technology providers. And now Jellyfish is 2,000 people, but that's 100 people that's dedicated to building technologies that scale, that can be sold and client-facing. And so I feel like this is really something that's interesting about a company like Jellyfish. And I would say that still mostly the agencies out there are companies that sell brain power and that are committed to saying yes to everything their clients would be asking.
And then when you talk about data, what do you mean by data? What are the types of data you're collecting? And I mean, I'm curious because I've met you actually because you hosted a La French Tech AI event. How does AI incorporate into the data things you do?
Sure. So when we look at data, we would look at marketing data. Now, what is marketing data? It's anything that helps brands be visible or understand how their sales online are going on and so on. So for instance, it's data from Google Analytics, from Instagram, from YouTube, from Criteo, etc., etc. All of those providers, solutions, they have data. You can go and open as many tabs as you have tech providers, but it's going to be freaking time consuming. And that's where you want to use technologies such as the ones we are building to centralize all of that information into formats that then will help you make the right decisions as to whether you should be investing your next dollar on Meta or on Google, right? In order to reach the audience male age 25 to 34 in Korea, right? So that's the kind of data we're using and that's the kind of problems we're solving for. Now, where is AI coming into play? Well, many steps along the way. And one of them that we are investing a lot in at Jellyfish, and our mother company is called Brentech and has acquired a company called Pencil. Pencil AI, what they do essentially is they make it possible to create creative assets at scale in a way that it's continuously being optimized. So let me give you an example. Say you are, I don't know, Nike, right? Say you're Nike, you're selling shoes, you're selling a bunch of things. You have your design guidelines, you have, that trademark orange, that trademark black, the white, the just do it, etc. Those are things are untouchable. You have to, go buy them. You can upload that into the software, and then you can let the software suggest alternative assets. What is an asset? It may be one of those, images that you may be clicking on. It may be one of those videos that you may see interrupting your video on YouTube. It may be any kind of text that you see on a Google Ads link below the search you may have made. Well, all of the things, right, they are very time consuming if you want to create a bunch of them. Not only are they time consuming, you don't really always know what is going to be always the best version. And that's why Gen AI can help you with generating bunch variations. You can push them through APIs to the platforms, Meta, Google, and TikTok, and so on. And then you can use the performance data to optimize and train the model, which will then create further optimized versions of those creative assets. So that's one of the ways, Gen AI is being used at companies like Jellyfish for marketing purpose.
So it's just, so it's optimizing. Okay, so even at a large scale, I was thinking these types of things are being used by small companies, but even at large companies like you still implement these AIs. Because I've met some actual marketing
100%.
agency owners, and they said one mentioned that they don't use AI, like they want to remain not using AI, and I was kind of surprised by that. I guess I'm just curious because when I met you, like it was like 5:30, and then we had a nice coffee chat, and then you left afterwards to meet someone. What would you say is like a day in the life of Etienne? Running a pretty big company, especially working for really big companies as your clients.
Day in the life. Well, I try to have some routinized parts of the day. And it starts with a bit of a workout. So first thing I do in the morning is a workout for about 40, 45 minutes. And then this is having some food in my stomach, trying to be as hydrated as I can, take a shower, and then go to work. And I think I'm saying that with a smile, but I think it's so important to start the day with having the mindset of I've done something which honestly is not the most fun. I don't really enjoy it. I'm not really motivated to put on my shorts and work out, but that builds up that mentality
unless it's soccer.
I'm just gonna, unless it's soccer. But the kind of workout I do is honestly, I don't enjoy it, but it puts me on the rails of just freaking do it, right? And discipline rather than motivation. Even though you're not motivated, just freaking do it. And then you can, tap yourself on the shoulder and say, okay, I've done something of myself today. Awesome. It's going to be a good day. Then I start with the actual work, and a day in my job is bouncing off a few different things, right? I kind of see my job as a matrix. And whenever you choose a career, I would say that most of the time you can have a somewhat horizontal job or vertical job. What it means, horizontal may mean that you may be touching on many things, but you're going to be a generalist, right? So you may be the kind of jack of all trade because you are a one person company. You may be doing a bit of marketing, a bit of sales, a bit of coding, etc. That would be what I call a horizontal sort of job. Vertical is you do one thing, but you do it freaking well, right? You may be the expert at marketing, and that's all you do, even though marketing is tentacular. But let's keep it simple. And I guess my job, I'm kind of covering quite a fair bit of the matrix because we're only 20 people here at Jellyfish in Korea. And I kind of love not having much resources because that's where lots of creative stuff can arise. And so what I really start my job with, knowing that, is always having something that's as factual as can be, which is numbers, right? I love numbers myself. I love spreadsheets. I love dashboards and so on. And this is really where I start with my day. And numbers inform lots of things. It informs where I should be spending my time. And it informs, what is the value of a potential client. I have these clients. I already make X amount of money with them. Am I able to make X2 by the end of the year, right? And if so, well, maybe I should be spending time with them. Whereas maybe there is my top one client. This is top one client today, but maybe I've maxed out their potential. I should just put them on a, renewal type of basis, but that's not where I, as the managing director, should be spending my time. I can let my team work on it, right? And so 8 hours of my day go by working on those things, which is mostly sales oriented and also team management. And once done with that, it's back home essentially. It's dinner. It's going to bed not too late so that then I can go for another round of that. And the weekends would be when I play soccer essentially.
I guess so. This is something because I've tried to run like a small agency of mine, like help build websites for companies, and I felt overwhelmed a lot. And a lot of agency people I meet, even at smaller scales, they get really burned out. Even if the clients aren't that big, you work with massive clients. How do you not get like overwhelmed or stressed out? Because sometimes deadlines aren't met, or sometimes there's some issues happening. How do you not get stressed? How do you manage yourself in those situations?
I do get stressed out. Like, I do get stressed a lot, right? And I actually went through some really rough times a few years ago, right? And I'm learning a lot from that, right? Because now I can see when there's good stress, right? There's really, really good stress that puts you in motion, and there's the stress where it's just kind of paralyzing you, and that's the stress you wanna avoid. And being able to kind of see those early signs, and I think to see the early signs, you need to have gone through, the burnout, because then you can kind of reverse engineer it and say, oh, that was the sign before that, right? So before I get to B, let's, pay attention when I see A, right? Kind of deal. So that's really what I'm using is my own experience and just make sure that I don't replicate things that I've gone through before. And one of the things that has been helping me a lot is actually, working out every day, doing something that's somewhat difficult, but for which you feel like, okay, I've achieved something. It's done. It's check. It's 45 minutes of done and good for me, right? Good for my health. And that's so freaking important, honestly, because that alone makes sure that you have some, I want to say, self-worth that you are always aware of, right? And being aware of what you're good at, what are your strengths and so on is just an amazing way to go through, stress and build up that resilience.
That's I guess, I mean, I do that personally as well, and I have like a group of founder friends, and every single one of us, I think we kind of, it seems like it's a common thing. A lot of high performing new entrepreneurs now, it's not like the old adage of like old CEO who's super fat, who doesn't work out, who just works all the time. But now it's like a new generation of people who always work out in the morning. I think it's just fascinating. But I guess another thing is, I mean, going back to like the networking and running La French Tech Soul, it's how I met you, and you host a great event. A lot of people come. How do you go about running like, great community events? I've already asked you the question, but I guess for the audience at home, how do you run great community events?
Sure. Well, first of all, La French Tech was around way before I ever was, and I was actually struck by the quality of the events, and that's why I joined them, right? And now that I'm on the inside, what I see is that it's working because there's passionate people. Simple as that. Because we're a bunch of volunteers, none of us make any money from it, and we're doing that on top of our daily jobs. And we all have fairly busy, schedules, and we are 12 board members, so 12 volunteers. And we always make sure to have a couple of hours set aside for La French Tech every week. Sometimes it's 10 hours a week, sometimes it's just one, depending on what's going on business and personal life wise. And why are the events great? Number one, it's because every event is led by someone who literally, genuinely cares about the topic. So for instance, I ran one which was about the SaaS ecosystem in Korea. I was curious about it, right? I knew of it. I knew about it back in France, in Europe, in the US, and so on, but Korea, not so much. And for me, I was just so excited about finding the right speakers, asking the right questions, because I genuinely cared about learning from it. And, we had someone who ran it about green tech, another one about cybersecurity. And I think as long as you have someone who takes ownership over something, genuinely cares about it, and is surrounded by a couple of people who can help by finding a venue, finding food and beverages, helping out, socializing the event on via MailChimp, LinkedIn, and so on, it can only be good. And that's usually what happens. We have a crowd that maybe 50 to 100 people, and people are always super satisfied about it.
Mm. And then that also helps when you're getting people, because the people are passionate, have the connections to get it. Because you've had like wonderful guests. Like I was amazed. I think one of the guests one time, I checked him out, and he might be a billionaire.
Yep.
Another guest, another guest is Coupang, like AI, like
Mhm.
very impressive people. I guess the other question is like, how do you get these impressive people? I'm assuming having an event really helps, but what are things you do?
It's really personal connection. Most of the time, the people that are on stage are people that at least one of the French Tech board members knew before, right? And so it's tapping into that hive mind that brings the best to the top, essentially. It's only rarely that we end up bringing someone on stage that none of us knew, and that would only happen because we find one speaker and we ask the speaker sometimes, oh, hey, do you know anyone who would be brilliant for this? And they would be bringing someone else.
Okay, so really the
Which
power of
is,
like
by the
mutual
way,
connections.
and which is, yes, exactly, mutual connections, and which is actually one of the things I try to do more of is asking for referrals, right? Whether you are working with someone, it's your client, the project is going well, ask for a referral. It's so easy, right? It's good for them because they can, proudly share someone who's doing a good job, and they can share that with a friend or former colleague, and do that with networking, right? When I do networking, I have 3 possible outcomes. 4, actually. 1 is I'm going to find a client. 2, I'm going to find a partner. 3, I'm going to find a candidate, like a talent. 4, I'm going to have just a good conversation. I've never had a bad conversation. I've never had a bad time. Could happen and it's fine, but it hasn't happened so far. And whatever you get out of this, you can then build on top of it and say, okay, well, now you know what I do. You know what I'm interested in. Is there anyone around you think I should be speaking to who could get value from speaking to me? Right? And that's awesome. This is how I managed to get in touch with some very high level at Samsung, for instance, right? And that would not have happened otherwise because you need to know someone who knows someone.
And how do you, I mean, if you could give us like an example of how you would ask, because I've tried different ways of asking, and I'm curious how you ask for referrals.
So referrals, I ask for on the spot as much as I can. Doing it somewhat, cold or lukewarm in an email out of nowhere is like, it's not great, right? So ideally, even before meeting the person that there's a few avenues, a few potential outcomes. Like I said, that could be a client, a partner, a candidate. And if it's none of the above, then it's someone that could introduce you to someone. So if you meet someone who's worked for companies that seem to fit your ideal client profile, then it's, hey, can you tell me more about this company? Right? You've worked there. Let's take the example of, Nike again. I don't know. You've worked there. Like, how do they work exactly? How do they operate? Like, are they autonomous in Korea, or do they report into the global HQ or the APAC HQ? Right? And it's about not just, hey, I need to sell something. Can you help me sell? It's just homework, right? Map out the accounts, map out what's going on, always understand what is it that you could bring as a value add for this kind of a company. And then obvious questions will come up. And one of them is, by the way, do you know anyone who still works there now that you left the company?
Okay, so that's what you asked.
Yep.
Okay. And I guess when you're also networking, you know, you're a human, you have to like show like you smile or those things. What are some things outside like smiling and just like, you know, pronouncing their name correctly, or those like common things? What are things outside maybe you do for networking? Because I'm very curious about that.
Smiling and pronouncing the name correctly. Yeah, I didn't think of it, but those make sense. It's true. The smile thing doesn't have to be a smile, but I guess we can all feel some energy, right? Think of yourself, you go to that, networking event, it's kind of awkward, you don't know anyone. And if you see someone who's somewhat open with just a look or whatever, it just feels good and it feels like the door is open and it's something you wanna cultivate yourself, right? It's how to show that the door is open, how to show that you're up for conversation, definitely. Then the other things is asking questions, right? I'm originally a very introvert person, and I kind of realized that when people ask me, so wait, Etienne, you never say anything. What's going on? And my answer was because I don't know what to say, right? And now what I realized that it doesn't matter what I have to say. It's are you interested in the conversation? Are you interested in the person? Right? And if you are, then just ask questions. Right? You don't have to say, you don't have to talk. Now I'm in that position of the guest, so I'm the one talking, but usually I don't really enjoy doing that. And I would be the one asking questions. And what's freaking amazing, especially as a salesperson, I found this out, is ask questions. And the best pitches are the ones where you do 10% of the talking and they do 90% of the talking. The best presentations are the one where you have no presentations, right? But it's tough, right? Because you want to come in prepared, you want to say, hey, we do this, we have so many offices, but ideally, you actually want to you want to hear their problems. And only when you understand their problems will you be able to say things that are actually smart enough for you to have the right to say something.
Hmm. I think you mentioned I'm also an introvert, and the asking question part. This is the reason why I did the podcast. You know, I want the other person to do the talking. I don't feel I have much to say as well like that. But I guess this is a book I read a lot, and it says the same thing. It's basically from Dale Carnegie. It's like the networking book, How to Win Friends and Influence People. And it says you'll make more friends if you're interested in them in a month than you'll ever in over the course of a year being interesting yourself. And I guess this is the last question I ask all my guests. It's sort of like, I'm young. For the young people who are listening, who are trying to, you know, become a managing director or become a founder, career, either wise, what would you say are some lessons you would tell them, or maybe your own self past?
The number one thing I would say is if you don't like me, if you don't know what to do with your life, start with sales. Sales is freaking awesome. It's really intimidating, especially when you're introvert. But that's an amazing way to just get out there, get nice slaps in the face, right? And that's how you learn essentially. That's how you can build up your resilience. And doing sales is where I got so much outside of my comfort zone, right? But doing sales, especially with some people that are good at it, like my first boss, my first manager was really amazing at this. And that it's not just sales as a result, it's also having people around who can mentor you, and always try as much as you can not to be the smarter person in the room, right? And be surrounded by people who are just better than you. And an extension of that I got was anytime you're in a position, we're going to be able to hire people. Even though you're very young and you interview people who are much older than you, it's fine. You actually should be looking for that, and you should always want to hire above the mean. So look around. If you have a team of 5, whatever the mean is of skill set, you always want to have something that's better, 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 better. And if you have this mindset essentially of, hey, you don't know what you do, that's fine. No passion, that's fine. Just go for sales. If you're going to go for sales, make sure to get rejected as much as you can. If you're not getting rejected, you're not selling hard enough, is what they say. And then, in as much as you can, surround yourself with very smart people. And there are a few ways to do that. It's either make sure you choose the right boss. Don't choose a company, choose the boss, choose the people that are going to surround you. When you have a chance to influence hiring, recruitment process is where you want to always search for people who are honestly better than you, because that's how you're going to be learning. And just do that as much as you can within a company, but also seek for mentorship outside of the company.
The second one is interesting. The boss, find the right boss, not the company. Wow. And the sales part. I mean, I'm young. I've done a little bit of sales. I remember one time I met them in a coffee shop. It seemed like it was a deal closed, and then in my face they said no. It's like so painful. And as an introvert, I relate as well, because it's just like I would rather just like I don't know, like stay at home and not do it. But
I know.
and it's
I
like I
know.
guess
I
you lift
know.
weights, and this is the calluses. It actually is calluses.
That's right. I heard from I forgot his name, but brilliant guy that's up and coming nowadays. And this guy said, don't try to be the guy with the six pack. Be the guy that works out every day. And I think it's brilliant because it means don't try to be perfect. Don't try to never fail. Don't try to be the postcard person. Just do the work that's required to get there. And I can tell you that even though you don't actually become that, you're still going to become a pretty solid version of yourself. And I think that that's really what you want to aim for.
And like that, I mean, the six packs. I mean, a lot of friends were six packs. I mean, see bodybuilders as well. They, after a certain while, they kind of get, it disappears. But if they do, because the passion maybe goes away, or maybe it was only for that goal. But if your goal is that consistency, it's like the people who are the most I'm amazed when I go to the gym. People are super old, like 65, 70-year-olds when they're jacked. That is much more impressive, I guess. Yeah, well, those three advices, those are uncommon, I guess, because usually the advice most guests give is, I guess, one of your thing is just surround yourself with really smart people. Almost everyone says that's one of the most important things. So, yeah, well, I guess I'm really thankful for your time, Etienne. Learned it so much. It's a pleasure having met you before and getting your guidance before. Thanks to that, I host these free events, and yeah, well, thank you so much, Etienne, for your time. It's been my pleasure.
Thanks, Salim. Likewise.